I'm going to give you a quick update on some suggestions on how to put one of these bump stops in on a Rubicon with aftermarket springs where the coils are a lot tighter and you aren't just going to be able to shove it through here. You're going to have to take your coil off in order to replace the bump stop. First, you're going to need to lift the frame high enough. I prefer to have two things, a jack stand and a floor jack, or in my case, a bottle jack, to hold everything up so you have a tire off the ground. Even though I had a Rubicon, it hasn't, for me, been successful just to unlock the sway bar and leave the key on. I actually need to remove the lower sway bar tie as well as the lower shock mount in order to let the front axle droop far enough. Now, I recognize with a stock Jeep, you often have enough space in between these coils when they're fully released that you can wedge this through here. And it's probably possible to expand these enough to shove this in. But given the challenge I had pulling these upper ones out, mine weren't completely decomposed like some people can just rip them out easily. I tried ripping one out just with screwdrivers from the side. I was able to kind of eventually tear it up and get it. But I pretty much need to pull this coil out in order to get my new bumper in place. And it's a lot easier with a stock suspension, but with an aftermarket lift, I was able to put enough pressure downward on the axle and then able to use a kind of a pry bar to push the spring off in order to get access. With the spring out of the way, it won't be too hard to go ahead and pull the existing bump stop out of place. Probably going to need a couple of screwdrivers, depending on how degraded yours is, to be able to pry up in there and rip these out. This is the stock bump stock. This is the best of the 4 bump stocks. The last one I'm replacing. And here is a polyurethane that I'm going to replace with. And I've had the best luck putting a little bit of either silicone grease. Probably any kind of grease won't damage the new polyurethane bumps. But I had some leftover silicone grease from another project that was kind of in a baggie that was easily accessible and free to me. So I just kind of lubed the 3 little clips. And that makes it a little easier to press this in. Again, it's a lot tougher on this aftermarket spring, how rigid it is and how tightly coiled it is. But for me, it was easier just to set the bump stop in the correct orientation and then start to bounce the suspension and put the new coil spring back into approximate position. Now comes the part where most people have been challenged. For me, I just cut a series of 3-inch blocks. Very similar to what a lot of other people have done online, and begin stacking those up as a tower underneath the bump stock, which we'll use to use the leverage of gravity and the weight of the vehicle to push the bump stop into place. So in this case, I have about 11 of those blocks is what it required on the other side in order to get enough length to press this in. And again, I think I have about a 2.5 to 3-inch lift over factory. So what we're going to do after this is get a jack stand back under the front axle to provide some downward support on it. Then we'll start reducing the lift on the frame to lower down where we're going to drop the receptacle on top of the bump stop. Okay, so I've got a jack stand under the front axle, so it won't be able to drop any further. The frame and the entire vehicle is still held up by a jack at the moment, and I have another jack stand that I already had taken some pressure off and has dropped. By the way, anytime you have some short, large pieces of wood, I like to save them and make a variety of different size platforms. They're pretty invaluable if you're ever doing lift kits or suspension work. Working on these taller vehicles, most of our jacks just can't always get to the place that we want. So what I'm going to do is release pressure on the bottle jack, slowly lower down, and we're going to use the weight of the vehicle to seat the new bump stop. So I'm not going to do very much of this one-handed, but I'll allow the vehicle to slowly come down. And I'm going to stop it and reorient everything. Okay, I got my block a little bit closer. I'll let some more pressure off the bottle jack. In my case, I'm going to need to go ahead and let a little bit off of my safety jack stand just to make sure it does not stop, as I'm going to need a little bit more room to move. Okay, so I'm close to lined up. I kind of have all of my little plywood blocks in a position where they're not catching up on the coils. I'll try to let a little pressure off the bottle jack to drop the frame down. Kind of popped in there. I'm not quite lined up, so I'm going to do a little bit more adjusting. Okay, so again, I'm still supported just by the bottle jack. I do have a safety jack stand to ensure it can't fall too far. I'm going to go ahead and let off a little bit more, and hopefully I can get into a position where you can watch this seat. And there we are. It's fully in place at this point. Now I'm going to jack back up to take the pressure off the plywood blocks so they can be removed. Okay, so the blocks are out. That's all put back together. I'll need to lift the bottle jack back up in order to get the axle stand out. Probably wait until I get my tire on, try to do that all in one sequence. Pull everything out, and we should be good to go. Hope that helps.